Welcome to this exploration of Stoicism and its powerful applications in our daily lives. Today, we're diving deep into perhaps one of the most valuable skills any human can develop: the ability to maintain inner peace regardless of external circumstances or the actions of others. Anger, frustration, and being bothered by others are universal human experiences. We've all felt that surge of heat rising to our face when someone cuts us off in traffic, the tightening in our chest when we receive criticism, or the persistent irritation when dealing with difficult people. These reactions seem automatic, instinctual. But are they inevitable? The ancient Stoics proposed something revolutionary: that we have far more control over our emotional responses than we realize. They developed a sophisticated philosophical system centered around the idea that while we cannot control external events or other people, we have absolute sovereignty over our judgments, attitudes, and reactions. In a world that seems increasingly divisive, stressful, and confrontational, the wisdom of Stoicism offers a sanctuary of calm rationality and emotional resilience. This script will guide you through the core principles of Stoic philosophy and provide practical techniques to help you navigate provocative situations without losing your composure. This isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming cold and detached. Rather, it's about developing the discernment to distinguish between what truly matters and what doesn't deserve your emotional energy. It's about responding rather than reacting, choosing wisdom over impulse, and ultimately achieving a state of inner freedom that no external person or circumstance can disturb. Whether you're dealing with difficult colleagues, challenging family dynamics, online provocations, or any situation where others might trigger negative emotions in you, the principles we'll explore can transform your experience of life and relationships. Let's begin this journey into Stoic wisdom, a philosophy not just for understanding the world, but for living well within it. Part 1. Understanding anger through the Stoic lens. The nature of anger. Before we can effectively manage anger, we must understand what it is from a Stoic perspective. Seneca, one of Rome's greatest Stoic philosophers, wrote an entire treatise called On Anger de Ira, demonstrating how central this topic was to Stoic thought. According to the Stoics, anger is not simply an emotion that happens to us. Rather, it's a product of a series of cognitive judgments and assessments, often happening so quickly that we don't notice them. These judgments typically involve the perception that something bad or harmful has occurred, the belief that this harm was done deliberately or through culpable negligence, the evaluation that this harm is significant enough to warrant a response, the judgment that displaying anger is appropriate in this situation. The key insight here is that anger isn't inevitable or automatic. It's constructed through a chain of judgments that we make, often unconsciously. This means we have the potential to intervene in this process. As Epictetus, another great Stoic teacher, succinctly put it, people are disturbed not by things, but by their judgments about things. The cost of anger. Before exploring how to overcome anger, let's consider why we should want to in the first place. The Stoics were clear-eyed about the destructive nature of anger. Seneca described anger as temporary madness and noted that unlike other emotions, anger has a special tendency to escalate beyond control. Like a person jumping from a height, once begun, it takes on a momentum of its own. The costs of anger include physical health impacts. Modern science confirms what the Stoics intuited. Chronic anger contributes to heart disease, weakened immune function, and shortened lifespan. Impaired decision-making. Anger narrows our cognitive focus and reduces our ability to think clearly. Damaged relationships. As Marcus Aurelius noted, anger separates us from our natural state of cooperation with others. Lost tranquility. Perhaps most importantly to the Stoics, anger robs us of our inner peace, the very foundation of a good life. When we become angry, we essentially hand control of our well-being to external circumstances or other people. We forfeit our autonomy and tranquility, a high price indeed. Anger versus clear-sighted assessment. The Stoics didn't advocate passivity or indifference to wrongdoing. They made an important distinction between anger and what we might call clear-sighted assessment of situations that require correction. As Seneca wrote, "The wise man will not be angry with wrongdoers." Why not? Because he knows that no one is born wise but becomes so, that few in any age grow wise, because he has a clear conception of the human condition. This perspective allows us to see injustice clearly and respond effectively without becoming emotionally derailed by anger. We can take appropriate action based on reason rather than reaction. Part 2. The Stoic Toolkit for Emotional Freedom. Now that we understand the Stoic conception of anger, let's explore their practical techniques for preventing and dissolving it. These aren't just theoretical concepts, but practical cognitive tools that have been refined over centuries. 1. The dichotomy of control. Perhaps the most fundamental principle in Stoicism is what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control, the recognition that some things are within our control and others are not. As he famously wrote in the opening of his Enchiridion, some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This distinction is transformative when applied to our interactions with others. When someone behaves in a way that might provoke us, we remember their actions are not within our control. Our response to their actions is within our control. Our judgments about their actions are within our control. By focusing exclusively on what's within our control, our own judgments and responses, we reclaim our autonomy from external provocations. Practical application. When someone does something potentially upsetting, pause and ask, is this within my control? If not, remind yourself that it's not worth surrendering your peace of mind over something you cannot change. 2. Cognitive distancing. The Stoics practiced what modern psychologists might call cognitive distancing, the ability to separate an event from our interpretation of it. This creates space between stimulus and response, allowing us to choose our reaction rather than being driven by automatic patterns. Epictetus taught, it is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them. This insight reveals that our distress comes not from what happens, but from the story we tell ourselves about what happens. Practical application. When feeling provoked, try to identify the objective facts versus your interpretations. For example, fact, my colleague criticized my presentation. Interpretation, my colleague thinks I'm incompetent and is trying to undermine me. By separating these, you can see how much of your emotional reaction comes from potentially unwarranted interpretations. 3. Perspective taking. The Stoics were masters at shifting perspective to see situations more objectively. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and dedicated Stoic, would regularly remind himself to consider the perspectives of others. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. This isn't meant to be cynical, but rather to foster understanding. By recognizing that people act badly out of ignorance rather than malice, we can respond with patience rather than anger. Practical application. When someone acts in a way that bothers you, try to imagine their perspective and what might be driving their behavior. Consider what challenges or limitations they might be facing that explain, though not excuse, their actions. 4. Negative visualization. Premeditatio malorum. The Stoics practiced premeditation of evils, mentally rehearsing challenging situations to prepare themselves emotionally. By anticipating difficulties, they were less surprised and disturbed when such situations actually occurred. Seneca advised, we should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. The soul should be prepared in advance for all things. Practical application. Each morning, take a few moments to anticipate potentially difficult interactions in your day. Mentally rehearse responding with calm and reason rather than emotion. This preparation helps prevent being caught off guard by provocations. 5. The view from above. The Stoics recommended regularly practicing a perspective shift they called the view from above, mentally zooming out to see events from a cosmic perspective. This technique helps reveal how trivial most of our daily provocations truly are in the grand scheme. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced this writing. Think of the universal substance, of which you have a very small portion, and of universal time, of which a short and indivisible interval has been assigned to you, and of destiny, and the thread of your portion. Practical application. When bothered by someone, imagine viewing the situation from far above, seeing yourself and the other person as tiny figures in a vast landscape. Consider how this interaction will appear in a week, a year, or a decade. Part 3. Applying Stoic principles to common provocations. Now let's examine how these principles apply to specific situations where others might provoke anger or emotional disturbance. Dealing with criticism and insults. The Stoics had a particularly powerful approach to handling criticism and insults. Epictetus advised his students, if you learn that someone is speaking ill of you, don't try to defend yourself against the rumors. Respond instead with, yes, and he doesn't know the half of it, because he could have said more. This counterintuitive approach demonstrates a fundamental Stoic principle. Insults only have power if you accept the valued judgments behind them. Stoic strategies for criticism. Examine for truth. When criticized, first ask if there's any truth to it. If so, the critic has done you a favor by pointing out an area for improvement. Consider the source. Is this person someone whose opinion should matter to you? Do they have relevant expertise or insight? Or are they speaking from ignorance? Remember, external reputation is not in your control. As Epictetus said, if someone speaks badly of you, it's as if he has picked up a clod of earth and thrown it at you. He's thrown it, what's it to you? Practice the Socratic response. When insulted, respond with genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness. That's an interesting perspective. What makes you say that? Navigating difficult people. We all encounter difficult people. The colleague who takes credit for others' work, the relative who makes passive-aggressive comments, the neighbor who seems determined to provoke conflict. The Stoics offer particularly valuable guidance here. Marcus Aurelius advised, begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, but I cannot be harmed by any of them. Stoic strategies for difficult people. Remember, they act from ignorance. Difficult people are acting from their own limited understanding and unexamined beliefs. As Marcus Aurelius noted, they do wrong unwillingly, being deceived. Practice empathy without agreement. Understanding someone's perspective doesn't mean you condone their behavior. You can comprehend why someone acts badly while still maintaining healthy boundaries. Focus on your own virtue. When dealing with difficult people, make your primary concern behaving with integrity, patience, and wisdom rather than changing their behavior. Mentally prepare before interactions. If you know you'll be encountering a difficult person, take a few moments beforehand to center yourself and commit to maintaining your equanimity. Managing conflict and disagreement. Conflict is inevitable in human relationships, but the Stoics show us that emotional turbulence during conflict is not. They advocated maintaining rationality even in heated disagreements. Stoic strategies for conflict. Seek understanding before being understood. When in disagreement, first ensure you fully comprehend the other person's position. Ask clarifying questions and listen genuinely. Focus on principles, not personalities. Keep the discussion centered on ideas and evidence rather than making it about the people involved. Remember, the goal is truth, not victory. In any disagreement, your aim should be discovering what's true, not winning the argument or proving yourself right. Maintain perspective. Ask yourself, how important will this disagreement appear a month or year from now? Handling digital provocations. The Stoics lived long before social media, but their principles are remarkably applicable to modern digital provocations like online arguments, critical comments, or inflammatory content. Stoic strategies for digital life. Apply the dichotomy of control. What others post online is entirely outside your control. Your interpretation and response are within your control. Question automatic reactions. Before responding to provocative content, ask if engagement serves any purpose beyond emotional reactivity. Remember the human. Behind every provocative post or comment is a human being with their own struggles, limitations, and incomplete understanding. Practice digital minimalism. The Stoics valued simplicity and reducing unnecessary inputs. Consider limiting exposure to platforms or people that regularly provoke negative emotions. Part 4. Deeper applications of Stoic wisdom. As we deepen our practice of Stoic principles, We move beyond merely managing anger to cultivating a profound inner freedom that no external person or circumstance can disturb. From reaction to response, the power of the pause. Central to Stoic practice is developing the habit of pausing between stimulus and response. This pause, even if just for breath, allows reason to enter where reactivity might otherwise take over. Epictetus advised, "Make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, 'You are but an impression, and not at all what you seem to be.'" This pause disrupts the automatic chain of reaction and creates space for mindful choice. Over time, this practice rewires our cognitive patterns, making wisdom our default rather than reactivity. Practical application. Develop a personal pause ritual, a specific action you take when feeling provoked. This might be taking 3 deep breaths, silently naming the emotion you're experiencing, or mentally reciting a short Stoic maxim. From tolerance to understanding, seeing the human condition clearly. The Stoics reached a profound understanding that human folly and vice come from ignorance rather than malice. As we mature in our practice, we move from merely tolerating difficult people to genuinely understanding the universal human condition we all share. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, 'The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil.'" This isn't cynicism, but rather clear-sighted recognition of human limitations. With this understanding comes a natural compassion that makes anger increasingly unnecessary. Practical application. When bothered by someone's behavior, practice the phrase, "Just like me. This person wants to be happy and avoid suffering. Just like me, they are acting from their current understanding, however limited it may be." From technique to character. Becoming a person who cannot be bothered. While specific techniques are valuable, the ultimate Stoic aim is developing a character so grounded in wisdom that being bothered becomes increasingly rare. This isn't about applying techniques in the moment, but about transforming who we are. As Epictetus said, "Make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, 'You are but an impression, and not at all what you seem to be.' Then test it by those rules that you possess, and first and foremost by this, whether the impression relates to those things that are within our own control or those that are not. This transformation happens gradually, through consistent practice and reflection. Practical application. End each day with a brief reflection on moments when you maintained equanimity in the face of provocation, as well as moments when you were disturbed. Without judgment, consider what made the difference between these experiences. Part 5. Advanced Stoic practices for emotional mastery. For those committed to developing Stoic resilience against provocations. These more advanced practices deepen the transformation from reactivity to wisdom. Voluntary discomfort. The Stoics regularly practiced voluntary discomfort, deliberately exposing themselves to minor hardships to build resilience. Seneca, despite his wealth, would regularly practice living as if he had lost everything, eating simply and sleeping on a hard pallet. This practice builds a general emotional resilience that carries over to our interactions with others. When we voluntarily face discomfort, we're less likely to be disturbed by the minor provocations of daily life. Practical application. Regularly introduce small voluntary discomforts into your routine. Cold showers, fasting for a day, temporarily abstaining from conveniences, or walking instead of driving. Notice how this practice builds your threshold for discomfort in all areas of life. Role-playing virtue. The Stoics advocated imagining yourself as playing a role assigned by the cosmos. The role of a rational, social being whose purpose is to live according to nature and reason. When facing provocations, they would ask themselves how the ideal Stoic sage would handle the situation. Epictetus advised, when you're about to embark on any action, remind yourself what kind of action it is. If you're going out to take a bath, set before your mind the things that happen at baths. Some people splash the water, some push, some use abusive language, and others steal. Thus, you will more safely go about this action if you say to yourself, "I will now go bathe and keep my own mind in a state conformable to nature." Practical application. Before entering potentially challenging interactions, briefly visualize yourself responding with ideal Stoic virtue, with patience, understanding, and rational clarity. Set your intention to embody these qualities. Philosophical journaling. All the great Stoics were writers, using written reflection to examine their own responses and deepen their practice. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations was essentially his personal journal, never intended for publication. Regular philosophical journaling helps identify patterns in what provokes us and develops our capacity for objective self-observation. Practical application. Keep a dedicated Stoic journal each evening. Record situations where you felt provoked, examining what was the objective situation. What judgments or interpretations did I add? What would have been the most virtuous response? What can I learn from this experience? Memento mori, remembering mortality. The Stoics regularly contemplated their own mortality as a way to maintain perspective on daily concerns. Remembering that our time is finite helps us discern what truly matters and what isn't worth our emotional energy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This practice isn't morbid, but clarifying. It strips away the triviality of most provocations. Will this matter when you're on your deathbed? If not, why let it disturb your peace now? Practical application. When faced with a provocation, ask yourself, on my deathbed, will I wish I had spent emotional energy on this? Or more positively, given my finite time, what is truly worth my attention and energy right now? Part 6. Living Stoicism in the Modern World. The principles we've explored aren't just philosophical abstractions. They're practical tools for navigating our complex modern world with grace and equanimity. Digital Stoicism. Our hyper-connected world presents unprecedented challenges to our equanimity. Social media algorithms specifically amplify provocative content to capture attention. And digital communication removes many of the humanizing elements that foster understanding. A modern Stoic approach to digital life might include intentional consumption. Choose information sources based on value rather than what algorithms promote. Digital minimalism. Regularly audit your digital inputs, eliminating those that consistently provoke negative emotions without providing proportional value. Reading charitably. When interpreting text-based communication, deliberately assume the most charitable interpretation rather than the most provocative one. Delayed response. Establish a personal rule to wait before responding to provocative digital content. Even just 10 minutes can be enough to shift from reactivity to reason. Workplace Stoicism. Professional environments often contain challenging personalities and situations. Stoic principles offer valuable guidance for maintaining composure in workplace conflicts. Focus on contribution over recognition. When focused primarily on doing excellent work rather than receiving credit, you become less vulnerable to workplace politics. Separate feedback from identity. When receiving criticism, remember it applies to specific actions or outputs, not your intrinsic worth. View challenges as training. As Epictetus suggested, see difficult colleagues or situations as training provided by the universe specifically for your growth. Practice preemptive empathy. Before important meetings or conversations, take a moment to consider what pressures or priorities others might be facing. Family and relationship stoicism. Perhaps the greatest test of our Stoic practice comes in our closest relationships, where emotional triggers can run deep and patterns may be established over decades. Recognize separate agencies. Remember that even those closest to you have their own agency and path. Your role is not to control their choices, but to respond virtuously to whatever arises. Focus on your own virtue. In any relationship difficulty, make your primary concern responding with wisdom, patience, and integrity rather than changing the other person. Practice loving from freedom. Love others for who they are, not for how well they meet your expectations or needs. Remember impermanence, regular contemplation that all relationships are temporary, through circumstance or mortality, helps us value them appropriately in the present. Part 7. Becoming unperturbable. The journey towards Stoic freedom. As we integrate these practices into our lives, we gradually progress toward what the Stoics called apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but a state of inner freedom where we're no longer subject to destructive emotional reactions. The role of community and learning. While Stoicism emphasizes internal development, The Stoics themselves recognized the value of community and continued learning. Seneca exchanged letters with friends about philosophical matters. Marcus Aurelius began his meditations by acknowledging all he had learned from mentors and examples. In our modern context, finding others interested in Stoic practice, whether in person or online, provides valuable support and perspective. Continuing to read Stoic texts and modern interpretations deepens our understanding and application. Measuring progress stoically. How do we know if we're progressing in our Stoic practice? The Stoics themselves suggested several metrics. Decreased reactivity. Do you find yourself less immediately reactive to provocations? Quicker recovery. When you do react, how quickly do you return to a state of equanimity? Improved discernment. Are you getting better at distinguishing what truly matters from what doesn't? Increased tranquility. Do you experience more consistent inner peace, regardless of external circumstances? Progress is rarely linear. Even Marcus Aurelius, after decades of practice, still wrote reminders to himself about basic Stoic principles. The path is one of continuous refinement rather than perfect achievement. Beyond techniques, Stoicism as a way of life. Ultimately, Stoicism isn't just a collection of techniques for managing emotions, but a comprehensive philosophy for living well. As we mature in our practice, the principles become increasingly internalized until they shape our fundamental orientation to life. The goal isn't to mechanically apply techniques when provoked, but to develop a character that naturally responds with wisdom to whatever arises. As Epictetus wrote, "Make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, 'You are but an impression, and not at all what you seem to be.'" This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's the work of a lifetime, with each provocation offering a fresh opportunity to practice and grow. Conclusion: the freedom of the Stoic mind. We began by exploring how to avoid getting angry or bothered by others. What we've discovered is something far more profound, a path toward genuine inner freedom. The Stoics recognized that true freedom isn't about controlling external circumstances or other people. It's about cultivating an inner citadel that remains unperturbed regardless of what happens around us. As we practice the principles we've explored, the dichotomy of control, cognitive distancing, perspective taking, and all the rest, we gradually develop this inner sovereignty. We become less like leaves blown about by the winds of circumstance, and more like trees with deep roots, able to bend without breaking in even the strongest storms. This doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. On the contrary, by freeing ourselves from reactivity, we become more capable of genuine connection, wise action, and appropriate care. We respond to the world from a place of centered wisdom rather than emotional compulsion. The journey of Stoic practice is ongoing. There's no final graduation, no point at which we can say, "I've mastered this completely." Rather, it's a continuous unfolding of deeper understanding and more consistent application. Each time someone or something threatens to provoke us, whether it's a rude comment, a challenging colleague, a family disagreement, or any of life's countless provocations, we have a fresh opportunity to practice. With time, what once seemed like difficult philosophical work becomes increasingly natural. In a world that often seems designed to provoke emotional reactivity, cultivating this inner freedom is perhaps the most radical act possible. It's a declaration of independence from the emotional tyranny of external circumstances, a reclaiming of our power to choose how we experience life. The ancient Stoics knew this freedom. Despite living through wars, political turmoil, exile, and all manner of personal hardships, they discovered a way to maintain inner peace and even joy amidst it all. Their wisdom has survived for over 2,000 years because it speaks to something timeless in the human condition: our fundamental capacity to choose our response to life, whatever it brings. As Epictetus, who was born a slave and later became one of history's greatest philosophical teachers, wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." May your practice bring you the unshakable inner freedom that is your birthright as a rational being. Further resources for those wishing to deepen their study of Stoicism and its applications to emotional mastery. Primary Stoic texts: Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, The Personal Journal of the Philosopher Emperor, filled with practical wisdom for daily life. Discourses and Enchiridion by Epictetus, powerful teachings from a former slave who became one of the greatest Stoic teachers. Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, practical advice on applying Stoic principles to everyday challenges. Modern interpretations, a guide to the good life. The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy by William B. Irvine, an accessible introduction to practicing Stoicism in modern life. How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. Explores Marcus Aurelius' life and teachings with a focus on psychological applications. The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. Daily meditations on Stoic wisdom for modern challenges. Online communities. The Stoicism subreddit. Modern Stoicism organization and annual Stoicon conferences. Various Stoicism discussion groups on social media platforms. Practices and exercises. Weekly Stoic challenges. Daily journaling using Stoic prompts. Regular reading and reflection on Stoic passages. Meditation on Stoic themes like impermanence, dichotomy of control, and common humanity. As you integrate these practices, you'll likely notice subtle shifts in your experience. Longer gaps between provocation and reaction, quicker recovery from emotional disturbances, greater perspective on what truly matters, and an increasing sense of inner freedom regardless of external circumstances. Remember that this is a lifelong journey. Even Marcus Aurelius, after decades of practice, still needed to remind himself of basic Stoic principles. Progress isn't measured by perfect achievement, but by the increasing intervals between reactivity and the deepening of your inner tranquility. May your path towards Stoic equanimity be fruitful, bringing you the inner freedom that no external circumstance can disturb. A freedom that allows you to engage with life's challenges not as burdensome impositions, but as opportunities to exercise the uniquely human capacity for wisdom in the face of adversity.